Gabriel Moreno. He is one, and then you have Alejandro Kirk, who was an American League All-Star catcher this year, also won the Silver Slugger, best hitting catcher in the American League this season as well. So you have him, 24 years old. He can't become a free agent until the 2027 season. And then you have the other veteran on the team, Danny Jansen. He's 27 years old, and he can he can become a free agent in actually, I had a typo in a file that I worked up. He can become a free agent after 2 more seasons. Alejandro Kirk becomes a free agent. He's eligible anyway after the 2027 season. So in other words, if you trade for Kirk, you would have him under contract control for 4 more years. If you trade for Jansen, it would only be 2 more seasons. And that matters. If the Cardinals are genuine about their plan and their desire to develop Ivan Herrera and have him be the next generation catcher per se, well, a 2-year timetable for that would make a lot of sense as opposed to a 4-year timetable for that. But then again, there's no absolutes. There's no guarantee that Herrera is going to be ready in 2 years. Like, in other words, to really be the number 1 catcher. There's also there's no guarantee that if it's 4 years, there's no guarantee that, Kirk would, even though the Cardinals would have contract control, they could still move him. They could trade him. So there's some flexibility within the situation. But again, one catcher would be under control contractually for 4 seasons, and the other, Jansen, only 2. So with all of that in mind, I thought it was best to just kind of break them down, because one thing, I did talk about this yesterday, but I didn't have time before we talked about it to kind of look up some defensive stuff on Danny Jansen. So without further ado, let me give you sort of the summaries of these guys. On offense, Kirk last season batted .285, high on-base percentage, .372, and he slugged .415. 14 home runs, drove in 63. He was 32% above league average offensively. And he was tied for 4th best among Blue Jays in terms of OPS plus. Great plate discipline, which we noted yesterday. He had more walks than strikeouts in 2022, and his walk rate obviously slightly higher than a very low strikeout rate of 11%. That is incredible for this day and age. He also had one of the lowest swing and miss rates in the majors, 5.8%. Had one of the very highest contact rates on strikes thrown to him, over 91%. He did a great job hitting with runners in scoring position. So you get the message. I mean, he's a really good hitter. His offense did plummet after his first 3 months this past season were incredible. And then he leveled off, and in the final 3 months, I mean, his power numbers went down. I don't know what the reason is for that. I do know that he missed a lot of time in 2021 with injuries. He had a situation where, like one of those flexor strains, and so he had 2 different stays on the IL. So my point being, he didn't catch a massive amount of innings in 20 or 21, and he caught a lot of innings this year. Maybe he just kind of ran out of gas. He's a bigger guy, unusual physique, 5'8", and 260 pounds. You can find photos of him, but listen, he moves really well, and the thing I'm going to get to next, Alejandro Kirk is an outstanding defensive catcher. So if you look at photos of him and you see like what's a good way to say? You see a pouch, or you see you see kind of a, you kind of see like like a bear belly or something,
Yeah.
Bear as in like a big bear. Interesting the way he's kind of put together. But anyway, it doesn't affect his defense. And if a guy's like out of shape or he can't move, There's no way in hell that he would have rated so well defensively this past season. So he caught 654 innings because he did DH some because he had 3 different catchers. So you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
He had 9 defensive runs saved, tied for 6 in the majors with a guy named Molina. Alejandro Kirk, Baseball Prospectus, they have really good metrics for catching different elements of performance. According to Baseball Prospectus, he was the number 3 catcher in baseball defensively. And he was 5th in pitch framing, 6th in pitch blocking, and 5th in throwing. His caught stealing rate was a little bit above average, but he's got a great pop time and a strong arm, one of the best rated arms. So his throwout rate was more of a reflection on Toronto's pitchers. Now, I told you about the only injury he's ever had. That was last season, as in 2021. So what I did mention is that his offense fell off in the final 3 months, July to the end of the season. Like his slugging percentage over that time was .335. But he was still just a tick below average overall. You know why? Because he gets on base. He walks a lot. And he's very unique that way. Here's something to take a look at. I now look at this because it's definitely a factor. What about Busch Stadium as a home ballpark? Well, there is a question there because according to StatCast, Kirk's had 23 career homers. Only 16 of the 23 would have been a home run at Busch. Does that give you pause a little bit?
Yeah, maybe. But,
yeah.
It's in consideration, but I would say this, the 16 are more than what you had before.
Now, if you're looking for power, dear listeners, Danny Jansen, I'm going to tell you a couple things I didn't know about him at all. Pretty impressive. Very impressive. So to clear it up, he's 27 years old, 3 years older than Alejandro Kirk. They're both right-handed hitters, by the way, and both of them do a good job against right-handed pitching. So he can become a free agent after the 24 season. He's 6'2", 225. He made his major league debut in 2018. He has played in 323 games for the Blue Jays. He hasn't been an all-star. He hasn't won any awards. His career batting line is misleading, so I'm not going to read it because he came into his own as a hitter, 21 and 22 combined. He really bloomed, or as I said, boomed, offensively over the last 2 seasons. If we combine 2021 and 2022, we're talking about a .496 slugging percentage, which is big for a catcher, .817 OPS, 41% above average, the league average offensively, 41%. That's over a 2-season period. And over the past 2 seasons, Danny Jansen has hit a home run every 15.3 at-bats. That's fantastic. And you say, well, he must be striking out a lot. No. I mean, Kirk has a ridiculously low strikeout rate, but I tell you what, for all this power, Jansen, the last 2 seasons together, has only struck out 19% of the time. Last season, Jim, Danny Jansen slugged .516, and he hit 15 home runs in 215 at-bats. That's a homer every 14 at-bats. His .516 slugging percentage led all major league catchers that had at least 240 plate appearances. And his other metric, which is similar to OPS Plus, was number 1 among Blue Jays. So he actually, if you go by OPS Plus or WRC Plus, his overall offensive game was tops on the Blue Jays roster, and they got some outstanding hitters. So this is fascinating to me. And you say, well, what about his defense? And I'll go through this quick. Below average overall, he's minus 0.5 fielding runs above average. That's the same metric that Alejandro Kirk's 3rd best in baseball. Jansen's not even average. He's slightly below average, and that's way down the list, though, 27th among catchers that were behind the plate for at least 800 pitches. Jansen was also ranked 28th in pitch framing. He was 8th in pitch blocking. He was 10th in throwing, and his caught stealing rate was about league average. Now, in 2021, the injuries are an issue. 2021, he missed 67 total days, 2 different stays on the IL with a strained hamstring. It kind of reminds me of Mr. Universe there a little bit. In 2022, Jansen missed 34 days with a strained oblique and another 36 days with a finger injury. So the last 2 seasons combined, he's missed 137 days spent on the IL. That's a
lot.
It gives you a little pause, right?
Yeah.
Will injuries be an issue? But here's one. Remember how I told you all that Alejandro Kirk, only what was it, 16 of 23 home runs would have been home runs at Busch Stadium?
Right. Yep.
With Jansen, ain't a problem. All 50 of his career home runs, according to StatCast, all 50 would have also been hit out of Busch Stadium. So that power travels, man.
It definitely does. Wow, that's impressive.
And let me give you this. StatCast has a thing where they give you the most similar hitters according to profile. It doesn't matter if the hitters are right-handed or left-handed or what they play. None of that's relevant. Just in terms of general hitting profile, right? Mm-hmm. Statistically, performance, even some of the stuff like how hard does he hit the ball, that kind of stuff, things like that. So let me give you the comps. Alejandro Kirk, the 5 most similar hitters to Alejandro Kirk, and again, it has nothing to do with physique. In order, most similar and on down, the top 5, Michael Brantley, Carlos Santana, Max Kepler, Alex Verdugo, Josh Bell, and Yandy Diaz. Those are pretty. Those are 5 pretty damn good comps, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So when you go down to Danny Jansen, so according to StatCast, here are his most similar hitters to him: Pete Alonso, Jock Peterson, Christian Walker, Anthony Santander from the Orioles, and Rowdy Tellez. So these guys are no. How do I put this? Like, mediocre, okay, offensive players. And when you factor in the position they play, when they have these kinds of offensive profiles, and while Kirk is clearly better defensively, I don't think the other guys like is stiff. But then again, Cardinals fans and some of the media in our town, like I always repeat, they would have you believe that Wilson Contreras can't even catch a baseball. So maybe they would get hung up on Jansen because his framing and all that stuff's not nearly as good as Kirk. So these are 2 really, really interesting candidates, to say the least. A writer in Toronto who covers the team for Sportsnet Canada, he described the Cardinals as maybe the best fit and said that the Cardinals have what the Blue Jays would want if they were going to move one of these guys. I would think that Kirk would be more expensive because he's under contract for 2 more years than Jansen. You get 2 extra years. So I think it would cost more to get Kirk. I could be wrong. However, the writer, Ben Nicholson Smith, who's really good, he mentioned that they would be looking for an outfielder who could bat left-handed. And he specifically mentioned that the Blue Jays would be interested in Dylan Carlson and Lars Nootbaar. Not both of them. You don't have to trade both of them.
One of the 2. Yeah.
One of those guys. He wrote, quote, both of whom would likely have real appeal to the Blue Jays. He wrote, Ben Nicholson Smith, could a structure around Nootbaar and Kirk work for both teams? Presumably, Jansen would have some appeal to St. Louis too. Yeah, he would. Listen, man, I'm kind of a Nootbaar honk though, so I don't know. I'd have to think on that one.
Yeah, the reason I'm just reluctant on Nootbaar because right now he might be one of the guys I could trust out there.
No doubt.
That's because I don't know if I could trust Carlson because of the thumb or whatever the wrist was, and we all know O'Neill. We don't know if he can be healthy or not.
Right.
So can you do that? The intrigue with Jansen and the home run rate that's really strong. It almost to the point, Bernie, where I go, yeah, go get him, and he could be a DH. You could carry another catcher because the numbers that you're throwing up there with his bat.
It's a good point.
You know,
Yeah.
he could be part of your DH program. You could carry a third catcher if you wanted to. I'm just throwing another possibility as, hey, we like moving parts, and
Right.
the Cardinals do. But, yeah, a guy who could hit, home runs, what did you say, every 13, 14, whatever it was, at bats. I mean, that's impressive. Because guess what?
It sure is.
You got to replace Albert Pujols' numbers as well, and he could be part of that process. Again, the question there is injuries. Can he be healthy? That's a big question.
It is.
And you would think if you're in on it, because of his injury past, you go, well, when you're going trade market, you go, well, there's some questions about his health, so the ask, you could say, shouldn't be as high because there are questions of his health. Just a lot to digest there. It's intriguing, though. Either one.
Yeah, I
though,
mean, isn't it amazing that they have both of these catchers
Right.
plus a really hot, very talented prospect who's only, I think, 22 or 3. One other thing about Kirk, and then I'll shut up about this. We can take a timeout and then maybe, cram in some college football.
Sure.
Alejandro Kirk this past season had 3.8 wins above replacement, which was 4th best in the majors among qualifying catchers. So even though I mentioned, maybe he wouldn't hit as many home runs at Busch Stadium, and I mentioned how his power kind of dropped off in the final 3 months, this guy, if you take his season as a whole, was really just an exceptional all-around catcher. You don't become 4th in the big leagues at the position in WAR unless you're doing a lot of things right for a lot of the time. So he's good. But the other guy, if you're looking for just Mr. Long Ball, it's Danny Jansen. But the other guy's a better all-around hitter because he don't strike out and he draws a bunch of walks. And that's important. The Cardinals need to do better with plate discipline. They made a lot of improvement. They can do better.
Yeah.